And now to shift gears a little bit, we'll talk about the art and the literature and the architecture and the culture, you might say, of ancient Greece at this time. As far as the architecture, when you think of Greek architecture, you probably most commonly think of the columns. These magnificent stone or marble structures that have columns holding up the supports, holding up the roofs, and have the nice gently sloping roofs going down. The building on the bottom of this slide is actually in Washington, D.C. That's the United States Supreme Court. And that's put there to show you an example of Greek-style architecture in the United States. And there's a lot of Greek-inspired architecture on U.S. government buildings, like the White House and the Capitol, and, as you can see there, the United States Supreme Court building. Now, the building on top is the Parthenon, which is a temple at the Acropolis in Athens that was built to honor the goddess Athena, who was considered the protector god of the city of Athens, as you might have gathered from her name. Now, an interesting little tidbit about the Parthenon, I'll go off topic here very slightly for a minute. You may notice that the Parthenon looks a little bit wrecked there, and you might say, okay, well, it's over a couple thousand years old, it's just decayed over time. Well, the Parthenon actually was in very good shape until the year 1687, which was 325 years ago. And what happened was there were some Italian city-states like Venice that were at war with the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire at that time controlled the area that we know as Greece. And the Ottoman troops were using the Parthenon in Athens to store, of all things, gunpowder. And the Italians attacked it with a mortar, and the magazine of gunpowder ignited, and the whole building blew to smithereens. So that's actually why the Parthenon looks like a ruin. It was in pretty good shape, and the Ottomans screwed it up. Now, in terms of art, we don't have a lot of art on canvas left from the Greeks. Most of the art we have is on pottery and vases, and it usually shows gods or athletes and things like that. There were a lot of sculptures. They're big into sculpture. Sculptures of gods, sculptures of athletes, famous men like Socrates, rulers like Pericles, and usually, instead of being in magnificent warlike poses, they were sort of just standing there, as you can see in this sculpture here. They tended to portray people in natural poses, which is really kind of different from other societies that we've covered so far, if you've looked at their statues and their sculptures. Now, in terms of literature in ancient Greece, most of it was drama, plays. A lot of playwrights in ancient Greece. They wrote two main types of plays. One was tragedies, which told stories of human suffering, an example of which is Antigone, which is right there by Sophocles. The story of Antigone, if I can remember this correctly, is a woman's husband was killed while leading a rebellion against the king, and the king decreed that no one could give this rebel's body an honorable burial, but his wife Antigone insisted upon going and finding her husband's body and burying it, and as a result she was sentenced to death for defying the king. But she proclaims that the gods' laws are more important than the laws of the kings. So it's sort of a morality play. It examines the relationship between humans and the gods and things like that. There were also comedies that sort of mocked people and their beliefs. They were sort of satirical, silly plays in many cases, and sort of like political cartoons now. They would poke fun at customs and traditions in society. And just to tie into English a little bit, you will soon be beginning Oedipus Rex in English class, which was also written by Sophocles, who wrote Antigone. And you better believe I wasn't going to let this video end without talking a little bit about the historians in ancient Greece. The Greeks are really the inventors of what we would now today call history or historiography. There were two primary historians that we know of today. One is Herodotus, and he's considered the father of history, and not because he's the first person to write about history, but he is the first person to approach history the way that a lot of historians approach it today. He's most famous for writing a history of the Persian Wars, which we've studied. But in order to write that history, he didn't just rely on secondhand accounts and traditions and hearsay. He actually went to where the battles were fought, and he spoke with people who had fought in the battles, and he spoke to the people who lived near where the battles were fought and found out how it affected them. So he really used very intensive research to write that history of the Persian Wars. Another one was Thucydides, who wrote a history of the Peloponnesian Wars. And as you may be aware, the Peloponnesian Wars are kind of bleak and not a very happy topic for the Greeks. But be that as it may, Thucydides tried to approach it in a non-biased manner and present the facts as they actually happened. So it wasn't so much they were the first people to write about history, but they did stress the importance of research and being unbiased and being impartial. And that is why they are considered the fathers of history. And that's all for today. There is going to be a quiz on this video, and make sure you have good notes for that quiz to study, and that will be on Moodle during our next class. Be sure to keep studying your notes and all your important terms, and be staying on top of your assignments. As always, be sure to ask Miss Hall or myself if you have any questions. Cheers!